Back then, I used to think that corruption was just something bad politicians did, some evil opportunity that is too precious and too tempting for a lot of people to waste. Until one post on my social media changed my whole perception about it. And it's about how corruption isn't actually a simple flaw in our system, but rather a legacy. A legacy that is kept being inherited, a legacy that doesn't only stain our past, but is also a legacy that is at high risk of affecting our future as the successors of this nation. And therefore, I'm glad to stand here and share my thoughts with you about how we, after realizing it just the way I did, can not only stay silent, but to reflect that we still have power over this seemingly never-ending issue. So ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Keshia Aqilah Dian Prasetya from Diponegoro University. In this speech, I'd like to talk about how corruption is a legacy that doesn't only endanger us as youths, but is also a paradox that is empowering. So I'm sure we all already know about how bad corruption in Indonesia is. Being ranked 99th among 180 countries on the world's corruption perception index might not sound too bad. There's a lot of people out there who probably agree with this too, and so did I. Until one day when I was scrolling through my phone, my fingers stopped at one post explaining the history of corruption in our country. And to my surprise, I discovered a shocking fact that the biggest corruption ever recorded in the world's history comes from the longest reigning president of our country. And that is not even close to the more surprising fact I found later, that it was a common practice from our local leaders to pocketing workers' wages, our ancestors' wages, during the colonization era. And with the fact that corruption still happens until today, 80 years after our Independence Day, it becomes all clear now that corruption has been rooted from a very long time ago in the past as a continuous and endless problem in our country. And as time goes on, that root has even become stronger by the help of hypocrisy of our citizens. Because now that we know that corruption is a legacy, it means that corruption has grown as a part of ourselves in our whole life. And realize it or not, ever since our birth, we have been fed up with the acts of corruptions from our elders' terrible parenting. We might thought that we have been always raised with good and strong moralities, as we were always kept being reminded to be kind, to share, to be respectful, etc. But they forgot the one overlooked and pivotal thing, which is the importance of honesty. Back in my high school, in my sociology class, I remember that I learned that there are 4 agents of socialization that are crucial in shaping who and what an individual would become. However, reality shows the problem that some or even most of those agents, which are parents, friends, schools, the environment, who happen to live in a corrupt society that we live in, have unconsciously internalized the acts of corruptions by justifying wrongdoings of their children from the littlest thing in their life. Because they always told us to not do this, they always told us to not do that, they always told us it's bad, but never really affirmed why the actions were bad and what happens if we did so. And as a result, that simple action would then grow into something bigger, from getting used to cheat on exam, not lining up accordingly in a crowd, stealing instead of helping on a big truck carrying stuff having a car crash, into stealing billions and even trillions when they have a seat in the government. And thus, without realizing it, we keep inheriting the acts of corruption into not just a mere bad thing, but a custom, a habit that is normalized. And when everything becomes normalized, crimes increase. Some crimes wouldn't even be called crimes anyway, as most of them have become justified. And if this happens, we can only wait for the downfall of this country as soon as possible, because there will be no justice at all. Opportunities will only exist for those who have connections and not those who are truly capable. Fairness becomes a lie because our future depends on who we know and not what we do. Social gaps become wider Because even if we decided to work hard, we wouldn't be paid as much as those who take shortcuts through connections, bribery, and manipulation. And sadly, this living hell situation is what we begin to see in our society. And if we don't make a move quickly, we will have no hope in relifting this country into its initial glory. However, ladies and gentlemen, knowing this fact doesn't mean we should give up. But in fact, we still have hope, and therefore we still have hope. Just like the saying, good things come out of bad situations, corruption is not a complete defect, but rather a trigger to push ourselves forward. It is a double-edged sword that we can utilize to ignite our role as the change makers and to fuel our frustration and transform it for justice. Growing up in a corrupt society doesn't automatically make us corrupt, but aware instead. And so if corruption is inherited, then let our generation be the one who stops passing it down. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we, in fact, are the largest, most educated, and most productive age group in Indonesia. Therefore, the youths have all the power to fight and to stop this habit to continue. We should unite and call out more people in overcoming this urgency by starting off with the simplest thing as putting honesty and integrity as the basis of everything we do in our daily life. Because, like they say, big things come from small beginnings. And as Theodore Roosevelt once said, to educate a man in mind and not in morals is to educate a menace to a society. So let us not just be smart, but also be good. Let us not just be the receivers, the inheritees, but also the transformers of our corrupt nation. And ladies and gentlemen, that marks the end of my speech today. Thank you very much for listening, and may this country be in a brighter future from our little actions.